Today we have this white Dogo Argentino mix. His name is Hugo. He was pretty good. He was a bit aloof, but once I gave him some treats and warmed him up, he did pretty good. He does know sit. He actually has a really solid sit. And then he did respond to my noises, but he was one of those kind of short fuse dogs where as soon as he figured out what it was, he immediately lost interest. When you're going after a dog like him, just make sure you are in position to take the photo as soon as you make your noise, or you're going to lose the shot. First thing we're going to do with this photo is go ahead and press R, and that gets us into our crop tool. And I'm going to do a 4x5 crop. You go ahead and bring this in a bit. Watch out for the edge of the tail there. I'm going to make sure not to cut that off. That is going to make him a little bit smaller in the frame, but I'm pretty okay with that. He's off to the sides. I'm just using this rule of thirds, and I'm going to center it up right about his mouth there, bisecting his face. I think we're pretty level. I don't have anything to measure that against, but I'm happy with this orientation. And next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit W, and that selects the white picker tool. I'm going to find a spot probably right on his nose here, and that will set the white balance. A big difference there, but I do think this is a much better light balance. It's a lot warmer than the photo was originally taken. Next step, I'm going to let Lightroom do some of the work, and I'm going to hit that auto button. And what that does is it balances out this histogram up here. And what that's really good for is it makes the whole photo a little bit more pleasing generally, but it takes the focus away from the subject. And to me, that's a nice photo, but it's unfocused. And that's good because it balances out the background for me and makes it a little bit less interesting. And later on, I'm going to edit the subject and I'm going to make him more prominent and I'm going to make the background even less interesting as we go through this editing process. I'm going to go ahead and hit Shift W. I'm going to create a subject mask and it did a pretty decent job. It did miss the dog's tail. So I'm going to go ahead and do an object selection tool and just add that back in and that'll do pretty well. Now I'm going to go ahead and apply my dog contrast preset. And all that does is it sets a medium contrast curve, it sets texture, clarity, and dehaze to 7 and sharpness to 17. And usually what happens when I apply this curve is it applies a little bit too much contrast. So I'm just going to bring up the shadows a bit, bring down those highlights, and then raise the overall exposure of our subject and hit the J key and just make sure I'm not overexposing. I added a little bit too much exposure. Looks like he's glowing, so I'm going to take it back a little bit. That's about where I want to be. I want to get this under the chin area that's got that yellow color cast. So I'm going to create an object mask there. I'll take the saturation down just in that spot, and I'm going to take it pretty far down, and then I'm going to raise the exposure slightly, because when you take the saturation out, exposure goes down a little bit. That should be pretty close, and then I'm actually going to take the saturation down a bit more. As far as other color cast goes, I think we're doing pretty okay there. I am happy with that. I'm going to go ahead and create another object mask for the eyes. I'm going to increase the exposure as much as I can before they start to look like they're glowing. And for this one, it's not that much. So I think right about there is good. I'm going to increase the temperature since they're brown eyes, warm them up a little bit, and increase the saturation as well. And that just adds that tiny bit of color pop. And I'm actually going to bring down the black a little bit to make sure that pupil remains nice and black. I'm going to hit Command E, and that will take me over to Photoshop. And here we are in Photoshop. And I have the remove tool already selected. The shortcut for that is J, or it's over here in the side panel. If you have one of these other tools selected, then you could go ahead and hit the remove tool, and that will be J. I'm going to use Command plus to zoom in and scroll over. And I'm going to use my right bracket to make that brush a little bit bigger. And I'm just going to go right over that leash to remove it. Did a pretty good job, left a few stray marks. So I'm going to go ahead and go back over those marks there. And then sometimes you can see some straight lines from when you do this. So just make sure that those straight lines, you go back over them. So that way it's not obvious that you use the remove tool. So now I'm going to zoom back out, see if there's anything else I want to do in Photoshop. And for this photo, absolutely not. That background is gorgeous and that dog is beautiful. And we're going to make sure that we take advantage of both. So I'm going to hit Command S and I'm going to go back into Lightroom and the leash is gone. Next step, I'm going to take the effects and I'm going to bring down the I'm going to do a post-crop vignette of -15. Just darken the edges, bring the attention towards the subject. I'm going to go to this color mixer, and I'm going to take the green. And green is a very attractive color to the eye. It draws our attention away. So in order to mitigate that, I'm actually going to push it over to yellow, which is a pleasing color, but not as distracting. So really yellowing up this photo. And then I'm also going to take some of that yellow, and I think I'm going to push it a little bit more towards orange. Just give it more of that autumn look to it. It is the fall, so why not? And the reason why I can do that is because there's no yellow in the dog except maybe in the brown eyes. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to check those eyes. And it doesn't look like I actually changed anything there. For my next trick, I'm going to go back to the masking tool and I'm going to select the background. And I'm going to go ahead and actually desaturate that background. Probably right about there, I think is good. I just really want to make sure that the attention is towards the subject, so desaturating the background helps a lot with doing that. I'm going to decrease the exposure just slightly, just really bring the focus in towards the subject. It's a white dog, so we don't have to do too much with the lighting. He's already the most exposed part of the image. One thing I want to do is the light is coming in from the left side of the dog, at least a little bit more dominant than the right side. It's a very soft light, which is good. That's why we go to the shade. But since we do have that direction for the light, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take a linear gradient and I'm going to try to match the direction of that light as much as I can. And I'm going to intersect this gradient or this mask with the subject. And now I'm going to go ahead and warm it up slightly to replicate that little bit of warmth from that light spilling in. It's just a very subtle adjustment. And I'm going to increase the exposure slightly as well. It doesn't need to be a lot to achieve the effect that we're going for here. And then I'm going to create a linear gradient, another one. I'm going to hold shift and I'm going to bring it up from the bottom. And I'm just going to darken up this whole foreground area. And it's something that pretty much nobody will notice almost no matter how dark you make it. But it really does draw that attention in towards the subject. It's a good trick. I really like it. I learned it from a landscape photographer and I haven't stopped doing it. And then next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a radial gradient. I'm going to do this over our subject. So center it on him and make it nice and big so it's good and soft. I'm going to rotate this a little bit so it's angled in his orientation, center it up closer to his face. And then I'm going to invert this mask. And then I'm going to darken the areas around and create a little bit of a second vignette effect that is really centered up on our subject. And that is just to, once again, bring that attention in towards the subject, play with the light, and see what we can do with it. And then last thing I'm going to do is one more radial gradient. I do it right over the subject's face, center it up on that, nice, big, and soft, and increase the exposure just a tiny bit, even more subtle adjustment. We could go ahead and look at all the effects of the mask. This is a good looking image. There is absolutely nothing wrong with this image. However, once we apply all of those masks, the attention just snaps straight towards our subject. And that's the effect that we're going for. So that's why I did all those adjustments. And with all of that done, that's your dog.
Yeah? You good boy. You good boy. You good boy, Hugo. Yeah, he's a little